All right, so it's been 1 year since Stacked relaunched, and I wanted to do a video going over just what's happened in the past year, and then it's actually going to be a two-part video. So the first part's going to be what's happened in the past year, and the second part is going to be kind of what we're working on right now, which is this product called M. So actually, to start, I'm going to go over to this blog post that I wrote 1 year ago, and it's called Something's Off. And a lot of the idea behind Something's Off is that, I think it's kind of obvious just looking at the world like, oh, maybe something's off here. But what I was kind of getting at with the title of the post is, well, I mean, number one, it's kind of a play on the name Stacked. Something's off with the name. But in a broader sense, it's really that I feel like a lot of what we hear in the world is like, I don't know, focusing on all of these external things that we can't really control. And with Something's Off, the idea behind that is more that, okay, maybe we should focus a little bit more internally on things that we can control and things that we can change about ourselves, as opposed to trying to figure out how to fix every single problem in the world. And so I kind of talk a little bit about how, and again, like, I think this kind of sounds a little bit dramatic, but I think it'll make sense once I explain it. But basically, it kind of feels like, in a way, we've lost our soul. So basically, what makes us unique? It feels like society is really kind of trying to come up with these agreed upon like molds for everyone to fit into. And we don't really, as individuals, have much of a say over what these roles look like. And of course, everybody's different. So, I mean, there are a bunch of different ways to do things, and there's really no one person or group knows the exact right way to do everything. So I think it just leads to a lot of fighting, basically. And I kind of talk about how these one-size-fits-all, winner-take-all systems, they really get us fighting over our differences more than celebrating them. And so, it'd be really nice if we could find a way to let people live their own lives, as opposed to having someone else tell them exactly how to think and how to do everything. So what I kind of saw at the time, at least, and still now, is that blockchains are really interesting. And I'll get into this a bit more later, but basically blockchains are these peer-to-peer databases that allow us to have basically a consensus between people without handing over privilege or power to one group or one human or whatever, in order to dictate to everyone else. It's kind of like everybody's on their own equal playing field, and you don't just have to have this one single entity as the source of truth in society. You can have all of these different truths or whatever, and people really get what they sign up for with these, as opposed to the systems we have today. A lot of the times it just doesn't really feel like we have any control over these things at all. I mean, you can vote, but again, that's really just, in most cases, a black and white binary decision. There are a lot more than like two ways to do things. And I think a lot of what I was getting at with it kind of feels like we're giving our souls to politics, essentially, is that when you try and pick a political party, I mean, are there really only two points of view in society, like black and white? Or are there millions or billions of different ways to look at things? I mean, we're all unique human beings. We all have our own perspective on the world. Wouldn't it be nice to bring all of those unique perspectives as opposed to just focusing on two? And when you only have these two that we're supposed to choose from, if you choose one perspective to try and fit in with, let's say, like 50% or more of society. I know a lot of people don't vote, so it's much less than 50% that you need. But, when you try and fit in with these political parties, you're really sacrificing a lot of yourself. And so a lot of the idea behind this is really trying to look at more ways to do things, as opposed to just one way and trying to agree on it. So that is actually what we'll get a bit more into later. And if you click this button, it'll kind of take you to the M page. And I'm not going to talk about this too much now. That's actually the thing that I'm working on right now, and that I'll show you in the second portion of this video. But I did want to kind of go a little bit more in depth on kind of the ideas behind Something's Off and what we've been doing for the past year. So I kind of opened up a bunch of different tabs to try and keep it somewhat organized. But I kind of talked a little bit about how kind of feels like we've lost our soul. And again, like it does kind of sound dramatic to say that, but I mean, if you think about it, just look at, if you go to Wikipedia and look up what is a soul. So it means to breathe, but also the mental abilities of a living being. So reason, character, feeling, thinking, critical thinking, all of these things that kind of feels like we're not really allowed to do. We're not really allowed to reason or think about things from our own unique perspective. It seems like a lot of times we're trying to force other people to live according to our perspective. But I mean, even if we're trying to do that, it feels more so like by trying to do that, we're getting a single perspective that doesn't agree with us forced upon us. So it's kind of like what we're putting out into the world is coming right back at us in a really ugly form. So that was kind of what I was getting at with the whole soul thing. And I've got a couple of funny pictures. Well, I mean, this one's not as funny as the next one, but this is kind of what I'm getting at. I mean, if you look at, this is kind of my example of like what it looks like in a typical office environment. And again, kind of funny. So like soul means to breathe, and people have their faces covered, and it just, I've been there where it's not even like it's not even like you can go talk to your boss like, oh, I want to do something differently here in these highly regulated environments. And that, I think, is what a lot of these office environments are. They're very highly regulated. So you can't really even go talk to your boss and say, hey, boss, I've got this great new idea for how to do X. Well, I mean, we've got all these rules and regulations for how to do X. So here's how you're going to do it, buddy. Go sit down. And it just, I mean, I'm getting kind of sad just looking at this. But I mean, even if you, and I'm not saying like everybody has to necessarily like work for themselves or something. What I'm kind of getting at is that when we live by just these decrees that are handed down to us that don't necessarily even have much real reason behind them, it's easy to feel like you don't really have that much of a purpose because you're not even really answering to your boss, you're not answering to your customers. You're just kind of answering to these rules and regulations that you don't know if they're really benefiting anyone or not. And I mean, just look at how kind of dreary and sad these people. I don't know if they told them to look like this, but I mean, compare that to this. This is a picture from, this is actually my first job at a movie theater. I was an usher. Well, I also did concessions and box office as well. But this was one day when we got the call that the bathroom sewage had overflowed. But I mean, if you think about it, I mean, like, look at this office job. This is what we're all supposed to kind of aspire to in society, and these people look miserable. This is a job at a movie theater, being an usher, and this is probably one of the low. I mean, I was 16 when I got this job, and a lot of people would probably look at this like, oh, this is like the lowliest job ever. But I mean, we're picking up, I mean, this is a pretty hefty amount of, poop in these whitey tighties here. And just notice, I mean, if you look at the bottom half of this picture, I mean, that just looks miserable, but we're all smiling. We're having a good time because, I mean, as much as I didn't really love the job at the time, I mean, I still got to be somewhat creative. Like, I would come up with popcorn recipes and stuff. I mean, you could, like, really get creative with how much oil and, salt and the ordering of the oil and the salt. That was also really important. So I'll stop talking about that, but I just kind of wanted to throw that in there for the juxtaposition. Now, I don't want this to sound overly negative about government and everything. I do think, in a way, like I kind of agree with this quote that government is somewhat of a necessary evil. So we kind of need this source of truth in order to exchange and interact with other people, because you're just bound to have disagreements between people. But if you really think about it, the state is an inherently immoral institution because it operates under a different set of rules than everyone else. And, you hear people kind of complaining, oh man, where's the equality? And it's like, well, I mean, equality goes out the window once you agree to have a state with different rights and privileges than everyone else. And it really is the devil's bargain. So I kind of talked a little bit about how we're kind of giving up our souls by trying to fit into these political parties in order to get power over others. I think the downfall is really that kind of comes back on us eventually. And so, and I mean, again, it's not really I don't really have any ill will towards people working in government. It's more the idea of creating a different moral code that I have an issue with. And that's actually what I find really interesting about these cryptocurrencies and blockchains is that they allow us to have these sources of truth between multiple different parties without having sort of this trusted super user, or I don't know, whatever you want to call it, like privileged user. These are open networks that anyone can join and contribute to on a level playing field. And because these sources of truth don't rely on physical force in order to basically enforce that truth, I feel like we can have just a bunch of different sources of truth or different ways of living lives, and people can choose what feels right to them. Now, another thing I wanted to talk about is the concept of deprecation. So, in computer programming, when you say, so let's say you have an application and you have, I don't know, a bunch of people using it, but maybe you haven't worked on it in quite a few years and it's kind of getting buggy. It's not really fitting the requirements anymore. Instead of just completely abolishing the application, you might say, okay, this is just version 1 and we're going to deprecate this application and we're going to build something new so that people can, if they want, they can just use the old application as it is if it's fitting their needs. But if they don't, if their needs aren't being met by that old application, we can always just build something new and people can choose. And that was really a lot of the idea behind this video called Deprecate the State. And part of the reason that I purposely misspelled deprecate is, well, I guess kind of number one, I guess it's just a common practice in the crypto field. But another part of that was not to confuse it with deprecate, as in like talk shit about. It's really to allude to the more like programming sense of the word. So if you want to watch that, that's really, I would kind of call it more of like an audio version of Something's Off. But yeah, if you want to check that out, it kind of talks about that same concept. Now, this quote right here, I just thought was kind of interesting when you examine it. I'm not entirely sure why I threw this in here. Maybe it'll make more sense once we start looking at the other tabs. But I just thought it was kind of interesting to look at this quote through the lens of cryptocurrency. And the quote is, "Government is the great fiction through which everybody endeavors to live at the expense of everybody else." And it was just kind of funny because I think I saw this guy's tweet and it just kind of reminded me of cryptocurrency. Well, it reminded me of this quote in relation to cryptocurrency because, I don't know, like in many ways it just feels like we're all trying to find the one coin that everybody's going to have to use, and kind of going a little bit back to the idea of more like kind of, I guess like in my ideal world, like wouldn't it be nice if we just had a bunch of different options? I guess I'm just not entirely sure that we're going to have one coin or whatever that everybody's going to have to use. And really, I think the idea behind fiat currency is really more so that you do have this one coin. And I think we're kind of taking that fiat mentality of, oh, there's only going to be one coin. And the reason I think right now that you only have one like currency or money in a given country is because the government's saying that you have to use this. Whereas historically, I think money has arisen more from commodities, so like gold, or even I guess in jail they use like cigarettes and stuff like that. So basically things that have intrinsic value to them, people are free to choose to use those as money because people are fairly certain that, okay, if a bunch of people are going to want to use this thing in the future for its inherent value, I'll accept that as currency because I don't need to worry about whether I necessarily want to use all that if I'm confident that, I don't know, society as a whole is going to want to use it. So like gold, for example, like you might not have a need for, I don't know, 10 kilos of gold, but you might accept it as payment because you're fairly certain that society as a whole might want to use that. I don't even know. Anyway, I wasn't entirely sure why I threw this in here. So let's see. This one, this is kind of interesting. This kind of goes back a little bit to kind of what I was talking about with, we kind of get back what we put out into the world. And so this, I I think I may have like ordered these tabs, but anyway, this was a post by Glenn Greenwald linking to a New York Times article on basically just what it looks like inside one of these chicken houses or farms, or I don't know, factory farm, I guess. I mean, if you watch the video, you're like, that's a farm. It looks more like a chicken prison, but it's just kind of interesting if you think about, because like when you look at this factory chicken farm, I mean, it's all of these chickens just really tightly packed together. I mean, it's nasty. Part of the reason I'm not playing the video is because it's just kind of gross. But I mean, there's just like pissing and shitting everywhere and all over each other. And it kind of, it kind of reminds me of this. It kind of reminds me of this a little. I mean, take your pick. But, oops. But some of these, I feel like this is going kind of long. I'm not quite sure why I put all of these in here. I'm getting kind of tired of talking. But anyway, I think this is the tab that I actually meant to go to after that, after this tab. But anyway, what I was kind of getting at with this tweet is that a crypto's value to me comes from its usages and applications, things that you actually need it for. And I feel like a lot of the volatility in crypto is really a result of, I think a lot of people are buying these coins expecting somebody else to want to buy them for dollars or something. They're not buying them because, oh, I really want to buy this coin because I want to use it. So at least my focus has been on building some applications that take advantage of these cryptocurrencies, as opposed to just, being like, oh man, this cryptocurrency is so scarce, when, the scarcity is only as valuable as all of the things that you can do with that scarcity, if that makes any sense. I actually don't know if that makes any sense. I'm actually filming this kind of late. But anyway, let's start to wrap this up. Jeez. Sorry. My enthusiasm is killing you. But this post, I really love this blog post by DHH. It's called Reconsider. It's actually, it's back in 2015 that he posted this. And this is really just a great blog post. I would recommend reading it, but let me see if I can there's one part. I'll read this paragraph right here. And he says, part of the problem seems to be that nobody these days is content to merely put their dent in the universe. They have to fucking own the universe. It's not enough to be in the market. They have to dominate it. It's not enough to serve customers. They have to capture them. And this post, I think, goes into a lot more detail, but that's a lot of what I was getting at too behind this whole like something's off thing, is that, do we really have to kind of all agree on this one way of doing things? And can't we just be content with living our life how we want to live it? And I think if we are just content with living our own lives, then we'll be free to live our own lives, as opposed to, this constant state of like, we're like fighting everybody, trying to like figure out like how everybody should live. And then if we lose, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't live my life. And it kind of seems like we're just constantly losing in the game of politics. But anyway, so let's see what this next one's about. This is actually, let me try and remember why I put this one in here. So this is actually a blog post that I did back in 2017. Oh, I'm starting to remember. So I did this blog post back in 2017. And if you want more of a history on Stacked, real quick, if you go to our Origin to Pointer, which is our kind of blog / YouTube, in this Origins video, I go quite a bit more into it. But this is a post that I made back in 2017. And this was, I was actually trying to relaunch Stacked, but I ended up not quite being able to. But a big part of that blog post was basically this idea that freedom ain't free. So, I feel like in a lot of areas in life, I feel like it's easy for us to just kind of accept the easy road. So like, I think in the context of this post, I was just talking about like Facebook and all of these web giants that, they'll offer to host all of your stuff for free. But what are you really giving up? And I kind of allude to like, if you look at the terms of service, they're not very good, but it's a whole lot more than that, because you really lose control over your own identity and presence online when you let these giant corporations host everything, basically your entire digital life, which is increasingly a big part of our lives. that might be a good thing or it might be a bad thing, but um, but yeah, so like when you accept kind of just the free thing, as opposed to, in the context of this post, I was kind of talking about how, it'd be nice if we could, I mean, maybe we pay a little bit money to host our own thing somehow. And by doing that, even though it's not free, we might get a whole lot more out of that than just living on these free platforms. And yeah, I kind of mentioned that I wrote that blog post back in 2017, actually the beginning of 2017, and I wasn't actually able to really follow through with a lot of what I did in that blog post. And I think, without getting too much into it, I had some like health issues and stuff, and I think a lot of that was just, for me, I just wasn't really self-dependent. So I think I had like just a lot of like anxiety, where it was like I was relying on all of these external things, whether that's a job to get money for food that I'm not like growing, so I got to go to a grocery store and stuff like that. Basically, all of these external things is how I was kind of surviving, as opposed to being more independent. So, I mean, I'm not saying like, I mean, and I'm still not like, don't look at me and be like, oh, that guy's like super independent. Like, I'm still reliant on a lot of those things. But ideally, in the future, I would like to grow some of my own food, like not rely on all of these external things for my survival or happiness. I'd like to be more independent. So that's kind of a lot of, I mean, I think I probably made this first part go too long, but that's really a lot of the thinking kind of behind this sort of new phase of Stack and what we've been doing in the past year. And so I'll point you over to the Origin to Pointer blog. I kind of mentioned this. This is our, I guess, video blog / YouTube channel. And I guess I'll kind of briefly just go over all these videos. So this was, this one I think I didn't really know what to call this video, so I just called it the Mayday video. But this one I posted on May 1st. So this was, I haven't watched this video in a while, but I think I basically really rushed a prototype of CKD. Because I think I think I basically finished this website on the 13th, so like a year ago. And then, up until May 1st, I just like really tried to go quick and come up with a prototype. So this is probably, I think I do actually talk about a decent amount about the ideas behind CKD in this, but the prototype itself is pretty meh. This, I just kind of talk a little bit more about kind of where I'm at with the prototype and stuff. This was the, I guess, first pre-release. These first like 3 videos are probably pretty similar content. Then once I got kind of the basis for CKD in that first pre-release, I kind of wanted to get back to, so like, I guess a little bit of a history on the motivation behind CKD. So CKD is open web services for dApps. It's really kind of, with Stacked, what I want to do is build some products. But what I want to do is, instead of relying on services like Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud, these centralized providers, I wanted to use these more decentralized web services. But the stuff I was looking for didn't really exist. So that's what CKD is. It's the Stacked backend. So I'm writing some backend services right now in order to build some other different applications. And WhipUps is one of those applications. So what I'm kind of thinking with WhipUps, and I think in the Origins video right here, I talk a little bit about WhipUps in that. And I think there are some links to this old blogging platform that I built. But the second iteration of WhipUps, I think, is going to focus more on kind of like tutorial type content. So the tagline is "Make More Happen." And basically, I think it'd be cool to have a site where you can just go to search like how to do things. So like, whether it's like, I don't know, like set up a chicken coop, or how to make, in this case, like a electric coconut smoothie. Really just stuff like that, and just stuff that kind of like educational content, I guess, is what I'm getting at. And this is this is the first video I did for that. It's not very good. I was just spilling stuff like everywhere. MBNT is another kind of side project, I guess you could call a Stack. What I was kind of getting at with this is, and I don't think these videos are that great. I kind of like realized like, wow, these are quite a bit of work. But I don't know, I've always kind of liked on YouTube, there's actually probably much better versions of what I did here, but just kind of these ambient sound videos. And I kind of wanted to, I've got like this nice guitar amp, but of course it like broke right after I like quit my job to work on this, so I haven't really been able to fix it. But I was kind of thinking of doing some more like cool stuff with that, but at least for now, these are kind of just ambient, I don't know if you call them like soundscapes. I don't even know what I'm talking about. But anyway, this is the second pre-release, and this one, I don't know, it's kind of, a lot of it is just a blur. It's kind of similar, but I think I kind of got its shit together a little bit more in this video. Deprecate the state, I kind of talked about that. That's really, I guess I would kind of classify it as like a text, or not text, a video version of the Something's Off blog post. And the origins video, in this video, I actually ended, I think part of why this video in particular has like 2 parts and it's going so long is that I wanted to do kind of a video on the Stacked history, because I actually started it like 10 years ago as like a somewhat different project. And so in this video, I kind of did like an origins video and kind of just talked about what kind of, basically like my history and what got me here. And I don't know, it was just like really cold out there, so I was having a hard time thinking, and I don't know, I just ended up not really finishing it out there. But anyway, that's that. And then, yeah, this was the last video before this current one, and this is CKD Pre-3, all about the D. And the D is really talking about more of like decentralization, and it's kind of I just go watch the video. This is actually getting pretty long, so yeah, go check that out. And yeah, so in this next segment, we are going to take a look at M. All right, so we are finally ready for the M demo, but before we get into it, I did want to kind of just explain what it is, what you're going to be seeing. So M is short for more, and it's really going to be a token service within CKD, and these tokens are going to be centered around the idea of giving. So it's really to find a way to fund the open source model, which is really what we're trying to do with Stacked. And as opposed to having a fixed supply of tokens where, you know, people are going to buy these tokens and then try and make a return on them later, it's really centered around, you're just going to kind of like donate Darrow to Stacked or whatever organization you want to donate to. And in return, you'll get back these, I don't know, like a token of appreciation. We're calling them stars. And so in this case, you'll give like 1 Darrow and you'd get back like 1,000,000 stars in return. And these stars are going to be useful for, let's say you want to, I'll get to that a bit later. But anyway, so these are tokens for giving, and you get what you give. So now, why do we want to do this as opposed to, I mean, the popular thing right now seems to be, you know, you do like an ICO or something and people are trying to make a bunch of money off it. So basically the thinking behind M and focusing on the open source model is that, to me, the value prop of crypto is really about empowering individuals and decentralizing power, which to me kind of goes against this VC public like company model of just creating these really big companies and trying to maximize for profit. Because when you maximize for profit, that's going to have a centralizing effect and making people dependent on your company. That's really what you're trying to do. You're trying to monopolize production of a good or service and then sell that good or service to people. And again, to me, it just seems like it goes kind of against what we're trying to do in the crypto space, which is decentralized power. And at least personally, like, I'd much rather have, you know, people be dependent on themselves as opposed to like my company or me. So, you know, profits are good, but they aren't the only thing to value. And that's really at the core of M. And just a little bit more on that, I mean, like I said, really, the way I see things is that dependence on all of these big things, whether it's big tech or big food or big government, it kind of seems like it's a disaster about to happen. And what we really want to do with Stacked, and what I think we should probably do just in a broader sense, is really focus on making people more self-dependent as opposed to making them dependent on all of these really big external things that we can't control. So, I think I was searching for a like proverb quote on Google, and this one, I wasn't actually sure what the source was, so I was like, you know what, let's just go with Nick Offerman. So, But I mean, just to add to that, I feel like there's a lot more purpose in making things ourselves and locally than there is, like it just feels like when we're dependent on all of these big things and we can't really control these things. We kind of had the illusion of control through like voting and stuff, but it's like, is that really our purpose in life every like 4 years or so to get up out of our seat and go put a, I don't know, put a vote in a ballot box somewhere? I mean, and it just doesn't ever seem to really solve our problems. And, I think part of the reason for that is that it just seems like we're asking these mega corporations and giant governments to do these impossible jobs of providing something for everyone in this centralized manner and doing it the right way. I think if we want things done the right way, we're going to have to kind of do them ourselves and take a little bit more responsibility than getting up out of our seats every 4 years and going to vote. Don't even get me started. But anyway, let's do this M demo on a brighter note. So, yeah, this is the M page. This is actually just locally on my machine, so you won't be able to do this quite yet. Probably not for at least another few months here. But yeah, it'll ask you first to sign in with CKD, so I'm gonna do that. And now that I'm signed in with CKD, it'll basically show me, and this might not be what it shows you in the end product, but this is just kind of what I have for now. So currently it'll show me how much Darrow I have, how much MCKD I have, and those are the stars for, I don't know, CKD is just like the ticker for Stacks token, and it'll show you Stacks Darrow balance here. And underneath that, I can select how much of my Darrow I want to give to Stacked. And in this case, I'm going all out. We'll go with 80 Darrow, and I'll get 80 million stars in return. And I can click this Give to Get button, and it'll take me over here. Now, real quick, I just threw these in a side-by-side so we can see what's going on in each tab. But yeah, basically, this will open a window in the CKD app, basically asking you to approve this give. So it'll say, what the account is that it's asking to give from, and it'll give you kind of just your information on that account. So what your Darrow balance is, what your MCKD balance is currently, and then it'll say what the website is that wants you to give Darrow and get stars. And yeah, in this case, we're giving 80 Darrow, we're getting 80 million stars. And underneath that, it'll give you some information basically just on the DAO or organization that is asking you to give it some Darrow. So in this case, it's Stacked. Our purpose is making the web better and people more free. It'll show you the smart contract ID, and then it'll also show you the smart contract balance. And again, this is all pretty, and then the smart contract code beneath that. And again, this is all pretty early and this is pretty rough, so it'll probably change by the time it's live and ready for people to use. But in this case, we are going to click confirm, and we are very sure. So right now it's processing that transaction on the Darrow network, and I actually haven't tried this on mainnet, so we'll see how long this takes. I don't think it should take too long. The Darrow network's actually pretty quick, so let's give it, oh, there we go. Man, I didn't even have to stop talking and make it awkward. So yeah, so we got a transaction ID here. We could check that out in the Darrow Explorer if we wanted to, but I think we might have to wait maybe another block for these balances to update. Oh, wait, what just happened there? Okay, so it looks like Stack's balance just got updated. I have less Darrow, but my MCKD balance hasn't updated yet. I think it will update, but that's another thing that I think we'll just have to kind of work through. I'm gonna wait for it to update just to make sure that it somewhat works so we can see that. Okay, there we go, finally. Phew. But yeah, I mean, that's basically how it works. And let me just close this window real quick. We don't really need that anymore. But yeah, basically what I'm thinking, and I kind of alluded to this earlier in the video, what we want to do in the future with these M tokens is basically make it so that you can use these stars in order to use different applications. So kind of a little bit of a preview, and this is not ready at all. This is just kind of a placeholder page right now. But what I'm kind of thinking of doing here is having some sort of like a bulletin board type application where you can spend these stars that you got in return for giving Darrow to Stacked. You can spend those to post different things to this bulletin board, and I think we're going to call it the White Rabbit or TWR. Basically, and a little bit of the thinking behind that is just kind of like opening your mind to a new way of looking at things. And I think this open source model and a lot of the stuff that I talked about over here is kind of what I'm getting at there. But anyway, that's still, I mean, there's still quite a bit of work to do there. All we really have right now is the hello message. But yeah, that's probably a good cue to say goodbye, and I will see you in the next video.